Alrighty. So let's open up the templates and show you how I want the project to be laid out. If you download them, there's template 1 and template 2. Let's open up both of them to see what they're looking at. So this is template 2. Drag this out of the way. And this is template 1. Let's see what they have. First of all, they've divided it into different little regions. Can you tell me what size my document is? 11 by 17. So that's a tabloid size that we're working with. Notice, let's see, I'm going to, well, we'll get into that, how it's laid out. But I've got different areas. This area needs a large picture with the title Dixie National Rodeo somewhere on it. Down at the bottom left, you're going to have some secondary information. This will be like schedule of events. And on the right, the ticket information. We're going to do that on our next class period. But the main thing we're going to focus on is this area up here. And also the background needs to have a dark border. When you think of rodeo or cowboys or western type things, what color schemes come to mind?
Brown.
Browns, earth tones, hot pink, purple? No? Okay. Seeing if y'all are paying attention or away. So be thinking of a color scheme because this is also part of what you're working with. Let me also show you how this template is set up. In InDesign, just like in Photoshop and Illustrator, you can work in layers. If you open up your layers palette, you can see, first of all, on layer 1, I have it locked down. This is where all the information is. And if you turn off layer 1, you can just see the template. Notice that I have a bleed edge of 1/8 of an inch and also have an inside margin. If I turn layer 1 back on, you can see where everything should be laying out. You're only going to work on layer 2. So when you go to print or to turn this in, you can turn off that layer just to make sure nothing will be showing up. Same way for template 2. It's going to have a large picture, it's going to have secondary information and ticket information as well. Look back on your project specs sheet that I passed out for the Rodeo Poster. You're designing 2 posters, so one of them will be portrait up and down. The other one must be a landscape design. Everybody cool with that? So no 2 portraits, no 2 landscapes. Both of them must be the different types. Use a color scheme. You know how to change pictures' colors. You know how to pick a good color scheme to work with. Use the designs that have the different photos and a different color scheme. Let's look at the photographs that I've given you. When you download them, these are the 3 that we're working with. So we've got one for some cowboy boots. We've got gloves and a rope. And we've also got a rider with a rope on there. Okay? So each one of these, if you had to pick out a color scheme, y'all have already said browns and things. You can pull up browns, but you know how to choose a scheme. The complementary of this, you can pull in greens very easily. You can get analogous colors and get a little bit orange or a little bit more yellow in these different areas. Or if you wanted to change it up altogether, you're allowed to do that as well. Each of the posters, however, must have a different color scheme. So if you use brown for this one, this other one needs to be a different color scheme. Make sense? Same way for the pictures. 2 different photographs to use from. Next one, moving down. The templates provide a place for the images and the text, and the photos, at least 1 per layout, 1 image per layout. So let's actually try to put a picture on here. I'll use this one first. Grab my picture box tool, click and drag over it, and then we'll drop in one of the images. File and place. Let's see, they're on the desktop. So which one do you think I should work with? The gloves, the boots, or the rope? Gloves? Okay, I heard gloves first. So let's put gloves in here. These are really good resolution images. And remember, if you need to scale up your image, use your black arrow, click the little dooley in the middle, and then you can scale this up to fit it wherever you want to crop it off. We'll say that's good for right there. The next thing I need to do is I need to have the text Dixie National Rodeo spelled out inside of here. So let's grab a text box. D-I-X. National Rodeo. First of all, when I'm typing this out and I place it on top of there, what's my problem? Can't see it. Way too small. Here's a little trick if you didn't know this already. If you want to quickly scale something up, you may be used to just highlighting the text and changing the text size up here. Here's a faster way. Use your Move tool and bring in your text box, then hold down the Shift and the Command key. When you click and drag, it will scale everything up automatically. The Command key is basically what's doing that. Shift is keeping everything proportional. If you didn't hold down the Shift key, you'd get something like that. So we definitely want that. So the size of it can be quickly changed up. But watch what's happening. Can you read that? You really can't read it. Why can't you? Not enough contrast. I've got black text and a black background. And no matter where I move it, I can move it here. I can see that, but obviously I can't see that. I can see there, but I can't see one side. So let's try a different one. Let's go for white text. Select it, change your text color. Let's go and do it the quick way. Is this any better?
Nope.
You can see it on the dark areas, but now when I move it to a lighter area, that's getting pretty good. But let's say I needed it to be placed anywhere on here. I've chosen these photographs because each of these photographs has the same problem. You've got dark areas and you've got light areas. And so it's really difficult to get a good contrast between each one of these. But you've got to use these photographs. So how can we create good contrast within this photograph to place the word Dixie National Rodeo inside of here? This is what our project is for today. This is the only thing that I want you to work for. So let's jump into the exercises and I'll show you. I'm going to give you several different ways of changing contrast using the different software we're working with. When you download the zip file, there'll be this folder and there's 3 different exercises. Let's try the first one. First one's going to be in Photoshop. These are relatively easy, and so here's the first thing we're going to do. You've got the headlines and you've got some sort of background that's different. Here's a cool thing to know. Just to be sure you select the correct layer. So first of all, you can either select a layer, or if you've got your Move tool, turn on Auto Select and choose Layer. So when you click on it, you can automatically select whatever layer you're working on, if you didn't know that already. Also, have open your character palette. If you don't see the character palette, you can always go to Window and open it up from there. This is where we can quickly change the color without having to highlight anything. So let's take the first one. On a scale of 1 to 10, you tell me if 1 is absolutely white and 10 is absolutely black, as seen here, what would you say this value is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Like a 2.
Like a 2 or so? Okay, let's select it. So I've got it selected. I'm going to pull up the color, double click. Very good. If you had to divide out the white to black into 10 different areas, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way down, there it is right about there, a little less than a 2. Here's the thing to remember. If you take any note today, this is what I want you to get. A good value contrast needs to be 2 shades darker or 2 tints lighter than whatever your background is. It's the rule of 2, moving it 2 shades lighter or darker. So if this is a 2, if I made it a 4 right about here, that's a lot better contrast. There's even better contrast. But at least 2 shades lighter or darker, and I'll be able to see whatever I'm working with. So we've changed that one up. Check out the second one. If you had to give it a scale of 1 to 10, what would this be? 7? 8? Anybody else want to give another guess? 5? 3? Okay, let's look it up and see. There it is right there. It's about a 5. Okay? When you train your eye, you can see them really good. So this is a good middle tone. So giving you the rule that I just gave you, how many shades or tints do I need to change it? 2, at least 2. So if I changed it to right about here, now you can see it really well. Same way for this way. You can go darker. If it's a middle tone, lighter or darker, either way will work. If I don't go far enough, there's just not enough contrast to be able to see the 2 differences. Be bold. Just like Morgan said, if you've got something contrasting, it's got to be really contrasting. You can still keep it gray, but that works out that way. So that's the easy way of changing up those headlines. Here's something a little bit more difficult. That's beginner level stuff. Let's get into advanced. I've got a unique problem here. Now in yours it's divided up a little different. My computer shows a little bit better gradation. But what value is my text? 1 to 10. It's about a 5, right there in the middle. And you notice, no matter what I change it to now, my background has a black to white. So I'm always going to be losing some area if I make it lighter or darker. So just changing the value of this headline isn't enough. I've got to be able to increase the contrast between the border. So this is where our layer effects come in. Do y'all remember how to pull up a layer effect in Photoshop? Where do you find it? At the very... Huh? At the very bottom, or you can double click. I heard 2 different ways. Look for the little FX at the bottom of the layer. The ones that I use most are either the drop shadow or the stroke. Let's try a drop shadow. I'll even zoom out so we can see it. Notice now, I've added a small drop shadow to this area. You can now see the lighter and midtone areas that I'm working with. The drop shadow, all it's doing is adding a little bit of contrast to the edges. And I'm change up the spread, change up the opacity. You can see now this really does pop out a lot better. And now I don't have to change the value of whatever I'm working on. Same way for a stroke. If I turn off this, I can give it a black outline. Very simple. Change up the size of it. Doesn't even have to be very big. That's giving enough contrast to be able to see what I'm working with. And make it a white outline. You can add both of them. A drop shadow and a stroke. That'll add even more contrast to what you're working with. The main thing is you're in control of how this looks. Having the contrast just on the edges allows you to see the text that you're working on. So if you have a background, just like those pictures we have, it's light and it's dark, you may need to do something with the edges in order to see it. All cool on that one? Same way for this one. This one's got areas of light and dark. Oop, now I want to change the color. You can double click the layer. That'll bring up your layer styles. Is a drop shadow working too well? Not too good. So just adding a drop shadow may not be the only thing that works. Let's try a stroke. Obviously we don't want a black stroke. White stroke would work really well. If a drop shadow doesn't work and you don't want to add a line around it, a outer glow is another type of thing. Outer glow, think of it as kind of a light drop shadow. It's a way of adding lightness around an area that you're working on. But use a layer effect to make these text pop out once you've finished. All cool? Questions about this exercise? Alright, that's easy. Real easy stuff. Let's see what we can do in InDesign, or excuse me, Illustrator. Illustrator is exercise 2. So this is a problem even some of my seniors have whenever they turn in their work. They've got a background one color, and they've got their text another color. Hey, it can be a complementary color, but obviously it's not showing up very well. Which one's the hardest one to read for you? Red and blue? This one? Bottom left one? Yeah, they're all a little bit different. If you look at these, why can't you read them? They're opposite colors in many cases. It's not dark. They're both light or they're both dark. They're both the same value that you're working with. Check this out. I use this to demonstrate it. Some colors, regardless of what color it is, have a value in themselves. So yellow is a very light color. So even, you can see this is just a pure yellow in my color picker. If I had to place it on here, it would probably be around the 2 range. Whereas the orange, or excuse me, the magenta, would probably be around this range. It's a little bit darker. So even if I place them on top of each other, you can still see a good contrast between those two, even though they're pure colors. Having a purity of color isn't enough. You've also got to have a contrast in values. Check this out. I'm going to make it really big and see if we can hurt your eyes. Is that difficult to look at for anybody? Is it kind of like vibrating for you? You can almost see little edges around it. The reason why this is so difficult to look at is because the values are exactly the same. This value of red and this value of green are the same. Watch what happens if I changed it up. If I just made the text, or excuse me, yeah, the red on it a little bit darker. Ah, much better, right? You can read that. Versus, or if I made the background a little bit darker. Still green. Ah, much better. Because you have a difference in value, now you've got a difference that your eye can pick up, it can see. So let's take it back into this exercise. What you're going to do, very simply, is to select each of the text. I want you to keep it in the same hue, the same color. So if I open up my color picker, you can see I'm in red. Make it either 2 shades lighter or 2 shades darker. Let's try it lighter. Now when I select it, that's much easier to read. And yet I still have trouble with this. This is something that, if you don't pay attention to it, it can be very difficult. For this one, we're going to keep it green. 2 shades lighter or darker? Which way should I go? Darker? Let's try darker. Still green, just a little bit darker. And you can play around with these. Either way would work. For this one, it's already pretty dark. If I made it darker, hey, that shows up. Or if I made it lighter, shows up even better. So what you're going to do for this one, open them up. Keep the same hue, same color. Don't use white, don't use black, and change up the lightness and darkness of your text from this one. Cool? Any questions about this exercise? All right. The last one. This one's going to be the most difficult, or at least the one to pay the most attention to. I've tried giving you the step-by-step instructions. Let's see. We'll update those links on how to do this one. Uh-oh. Tell you what. I've got one. Obviously, I already worked on. Let me re-download this one, just so we can get a fresh copy. 3, 2, 1. There it goes. Okay. We'll trash this one from the last class. Come on. All right, much better. So these exercises. I've got 4 different images and the same text on top of it. Now what I don't want to do is to change the text itself. I want to keep it the same color. And some of these don't necessarily have contrast of value problems. This one's pretty good. It's got good lights and darks. But why is it still difficult to read the word important text? There's a lot in the background. What about the background? It's busy, it's... Second?
I just said it was busy.
Yeah, very busy. If I had to put a word to it, the background is just as sharp, just as in focus as the foreground. Remember we were talking about good foreground and background? Usually the background would be more out of focus than the foreground. So let's try that. We're going to open this up in Photoshop. So remember, select your image, hold down Control, Edit With, there's Photoshop. So what I want to do is I want to blur this image, make it out of focus. Photoshop has a filter. Under blur, I got several blur filters. I like to use Gaussian blur because it gives me the most control. With Gaussian blur, I can tell it to blur it a lot or a little. You can quickly lose your image, so don't go too much. Just enough to where you can still make out what it is, but also blur it up. That sounds good to me. Looks good to me. Now that it's out of focus, I'm going to save it, Command-S, close it out. And now I've got something like this. You can read that a whole lot better than it was before because you've got contrast, blurred and unblurred. Here's another one. Kind of has the same problem. But instead of blurring it out, here's another thing we can do. We can give it the background of our text a color to see through. Here's what we're going to do. I've got my text inside of a text box. I'm going to give my text box a color. I'm going to fill it with a kind of a darker shade of blue, something that'll match up this pretty good. We'll say okay with that. Now I still want to be able to see my background. If I was to lower the opacity of just my text that I'm working with, let's see what would happen. I'm going to open up my effects window. So window, yeah, I've already got the effects open. We're going to use this window. Here's the opacity that I'm working with. Watch what happens if I lower it. What am I losing? I'm losing my text. I don't want to be able to do that. What I want to do is to lower the opacity of the blue. Here's the trick to it. Click on the word fill. The fill color is the blue. Now if I lower the opacity, the text will stay the same, but I can still see the blue and the text behind it. This is a little bit easier to read now because I've given it a solid color while still maintaining some of that texture on the background. Pretty cool? Easy, easy stuff. Here's another really easy one. I'll go down to this one. Has the same problem. I've got light areas, I've got dark areas. In InDesign, you can also have a drop shadow. With this one, we need to use an effect. By the way, if you don't see the effect, it's in your effects menu. There's the word effects. You can click on it, and here's some different effects that we can apply to it. There's a drop shadow. If you don't have your effects menu opened, in your tool options, there's an effects. If you don't even have that open, you can go to Object, and there's the effects. So there's plenty of places to find them. But let's try the drop shadow to this one. I'm going to admit, I hate doing drop shadows in InDesign. They're just not as easy to do as Photoshop is. But you can still do it. You can change your opacity of your drop shadow. You can even change the color of it. You can change the distance, so how close it is or how far away. You can change the angle. Come on, there we go. And you can change the amount of blur. So you can have a very blurry shadow. You can have a very, very tight shadow. I want you to play around with this, but give it a drop shadow of some sort. Ooh, going the wrong way. There we go. Give it a drop shadow. Just a little bit is enough to set it off from the background, just a little bit. And that's found under the effects. We'll say OK to that. And that's how we've applied that one. Here's the most, I don't want to say difficult, but the most interesting one to work with. This one has a picture inside of a box. Okay? Actually, let me delete the picture just for a second. My box is black. You'll see why that's important in a second. So I've got a picture inside of a black box. I'm going to select my picture by clicking on the little dooley. Not the box, the picture. And we're going to add what's called a gradient feather to this one. So let's go to the effects. And here's gradient feather. This is what the gradient feather is doing. It's changing the opacity of my picture from being very opaque and then gradually getting more transparent, more opaque. And here's where it looks in this way. Notice that this stop is 100% black, 100% opacity, all the way to white, which is transparent. So if I move this around, do you see what's happening? So what I want to do, I want it to start off really opaque, get transparent here, and then get opaque again. So I'm going to drag this to the middle. You can click here to add another stop, and let's make this one 100% opaque. So do you see what's happening? Opaque, transparent, back to opaque. Have I lost everybody? Cool stuff. It's going up and down, but we can change the angle to this way, and that's what we want. And you can move it around so that it can be right on top of your text. We'll say OK to this. So that looks pretty cool, but I don't want that black to be in there. I want to change the color now of my box. So I'm going to deselect this. Then I'm just going to select the box itself. I don't have the picture selected, and change the color from black to kind of a sky blue, whatever would match that one. Now check out what I've got. Now this is much easier to read because I've got a solid or a gradient of blue behind it, but I still have my picture that I'm working from. Any questions for these exercises? Very simple, very easy stuff. Now you know several different ways of increasing contrast between your layout. So if I went back to my Dixie National Rodeo thing, you know some ways now of changing this up. What can I do to the background, to the image, to the text, to what's behind it to make my text stand out a lot more? Feel free to use any font that you want to. Feel free to change the size of it. This doesn't have to be in one line. You can even put it on like Dixie National Rodeo. Obviously I need to make my text box bigger. however you want to fit inside of this one. Also, don't forget you can change up the colors. Think about a color scheme that you're working with. We're going to deal with the text information next class period. So for today, all I want you to do is to have the picture and the title laid out for both of your designs. Save it, and we'll pick it up next class. All right, turn your computers back over to you and let y'all get started on these exercises.